Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about orientation and the best way to orient certain types of objects. Whether it be a piece of hair, a head, hand, or something like that, we're going to go over different methods that you might want to use or consider when looking at different parts and the best way to orient them based on the quality of the part and how you want the part to look when you do finally print it. Because keep in mind, in every one of these cases, the more supports you put on it, that's either sanding that you're going to do or some sort of finishing work that's going to have to go in there to fix it. Otherwise, it's just going to look awful because you're just going to have too many support marks on the part. Anyway, we're going to go over a couple different types of parts, and I'm going to go over different ways to support them. Different ways to orient them so you get the best out of your supporting work. All right, let's get into it. All right, so we're going to go over a couple different types of parts from the same model so it makes sense. Now, the first thing we're going to go over is a simple hand. Now, remember, I talked about that whole finger curling thing. Now, this hand is balled up, but it's not, those fingers aren't touching 100%. So we still need to think about orientation. Best way to orient this is so that way these fingertips are not facing downward because putting supports in between here and here is just don't. This is actually a good way for this fist to be facing down, but we're going to have to figure out a better way because I don't like the arm leaning this much like this. Reason I don't like that is because let's just say you were going to put supports on it like that. Let's just use auto supports just to demonstrate. They're all going to be all over the bottom of this arm, and they're going to cover the hand. This is definitely not the way to support that item and orient it. What I would do in this case is then turn the hand like this. Now, these fingertips are facing the opposite direction, and they don't pose a threat to become islands that way. The thumb is an island, but that's easy to deal with, as are these knuckles because they're much larger surfaces. You also put less damage on the actual arm, and you're focusing mostly on just this part of the bicep here. You can lean the arm back a little bit like this, or you can even lean it further forward like that and tilt it onto the elbow. Just try not to make these fingertips become islands. That's really the biggest thing. You don't want to have to worry about supporting in between here. It's just a pain. Pain to clean, pain to do that. Just don't do it. All right, next item on the list is the ponytail. Now, I would probably tell you to hollow this hunky thing because it's just way too large. And having this big, bulky ponytail hanging off the back of her head when she's finally finished and physically exists in the real world is going to be too big and eventually it's going to snap off. It's a pretty big key, though. So, I mean, maybe you could take your chances, but the versions of the model that I have built to date all have a hollowed hairpiece. But let's just pretend you're not going to do that. My suggestion would be to orient it like this. So the tendrils are all facing up. This puts the least amount of stress on these weird little stringy bits of hair that honestly are going to be a little bit more fragile than you think they are. Yes, you're going to have to put supports all over the top of the ponytail, but it is the top and the back of her head that is going to be this area that you're going to not really see that much because you're going to put it on a shelf and that part is going to be facing the back of the shelf. So again, placing them in the place they should be. This is the best orientation for a part like this. This reduces the amount of supports. This is reducing the amount of stress on these parts. You don't have to support all these weird shapes down at the bottom. It just works better this way. The other arm has its hand open. And in this case, we'll just face the fingertips up, including the thumb. Again, right here on the elbow like that. Now, this is one of the legs. Now, I've seen some people orient legs like that, and I want to cry inside a little. Sure, this is the back of the leg, but please don't ever do that. Stand them up like that. and lean them in a direction that's going to cause the least amount of additional support damage other than what's here on the key and the seam area. That's it. You can also hollow big objects like this leg. It's thick enough that it will benefit from hollowing. We have another leg, but this is pretty much the same because it's not really oriented any different. It's not bent in any weird way. It's a little bendy. So in this case, what you can do is you can actually arc the leg like that. So it's more kind of like an angle. So this is more of an angle to the plate as well. Because you don't really want to do it straight over like this, as that creates more of an overhang. So doing it like that is a better way to do it. Then we're going to look at one of the heads. And now this is another one that I am going to recommend you actually support it. Not exactly like that, but like just about there. Maybe a little adjusted. The reason for this is because this area right here, they're already in a weird position. In fact, you really want to have this facing up almost, but then this little flower becomes an issue. So you need to find a happy balance between here and here that works the best for the islands, because this little flower creates problems and this little bit here in the front creates problems. This whole area is fine. You can use this as a nice anchor point for supports, and this is again the back of her head. There's the key at the bottom. This is a good orientation like this. Foot. This can be tricky. Depends. You can support them like this, so they come off like that, or you can support them like this. But then that creates more of a gap here, which actually creates more of an issue for the flip-flop. So for the flip-flop, I would actually recommend you do this. And then you still have to support the inside of the heel here. But I still think it'll be a little bit easier from this angle to be able to do that. Plus, you can also tilt this back like that. This key can stick out this way. You support this area, and then it moves up. So you have less of an issue between the sandal and the foot. And you can tilt. You can change that tilt to decrease or increase how much you want to compensate. Another arm. This one has an intricate bracelet on it. So whenever you see anything intricate like this, any patterns or textured stuff, for the love of everything, please try to get it away from the build plate. Okay? I'm going to try and face this up like that and having the elbow facing down. Yes, I know what I said about trying to avoid your islands and the fingertips, but in this case, the decoration here is a little bit more important than just protecting your fingertips and fingernails. Yes, every one of these fingertips has become an island, and the fingernail has also become an island, but you have plenty of room to put supports, and it doesn't need to be a mess. So, honestly, I think it's fine, just as long as you preserve the quality of this little bracelet thing. Now, it really wants to be... Yeah, you want to try to get that as straight up and down as possible, because this has just so many islands there that you definitely want to avoid that being facing towards the build plate at all. That would just be bad. Again, we're looking at a foot. This is actually in a shoe. So you could do these. I mean, there's a couple ways you can do this kind of object. You can lean it like this, key first. I would actually kind of lean it this way a little bit. And then you have it build up that like that. You can tilt it around like this and build them upside down, starting with the key and then working its way backwards. from back to front. I actually recommend doing them like this, more of the front style. Creates a pretty easy way to do it. That heel's pretty thick. It's not going to snap off. That way you don't have to mess with the key. You won't have any support marks on the key. That way it'll fit better. So it's a win-win on that one. We have another head here. Now this one's interesting because we have these giant floppy earrings. We also have bits of hair, and all these bits of bangs as well that are kind of like hanging down here as well. So, or maybe not bangs. I'm not sure what you call that. Anyway, all of that is an issue when it comes to sporting. You definitely don't want these on the bottom. You don't want the head supported on these things. So the best way to do this is actually to turn her head almost completely upside down, like that. Now the great thing is that she has a giant key socket for that ponytail, and that ponytail is going to cover a large amount of space there as well. This also eliminates the issue of the earrings because the earrings are no longer an island. They now become a lot easier to work with, as do these little fine bits of hair. So her entire head becomes a lot easier to work with once you flip it upside down. The last piece we have to look at is the other hair piece, which is the front hair piece. Now, this was a strange one, and I remember I stared at this one for a while because there's a couple orientations I thought of. What I eventually went with was something that actually looked like this, where this long wispy piece was sticking upwards instead of being an island or anything that was problematic. And then these other pieces just went straight up like that. I wound up putting a few supports down here in this area and a few that ran off the edges, and the part came out fine. It all really depends on, where you want to do your cleanup. But I think when it comes to orientation, printing parts like this long ways rather than printing them, parallel to the plate, it works a lot better. You're going to get a lot more success rates, and you're going to get uh, a lot more good-looking prints versus trying to stretch everything parallel to the build plate. It's one thing I see a lot of when people start is they'll build things very flat, or they'll try to lay them down as flat as possible to try to speed up the process of printing. Don't speed it up. Let it take its time. Printers are actually better to run them slower than faster. You're going to have a higher rate of success if you run a slower printer versus trying to do everything at high speed. That's where you start running into problems. Anyway, that pretty much does it for this Lychee Basics episode. And that does it for our orientation chat. So, anyway, I hope you guys got something out of this episode. Really appreciate y'all watching as usual. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all again real soon. Take care now. Bye bye.